Welcome back for part 2. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Welcome to the jam. I don't know why I just said that, but I did. Here we are. It's 11:49 on a Saturday, June 26, 2022. And I'm a robot from the future. Though not really. I just play one on this podcast. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Breaking news. I'm just tuning into this. Didn't know this had just happened. Because I've been busy doing other things and not staring at the TV screen. But it's tragic. It's and heartrending. There's been a building collapse in Florida. I'm sure you can go and see all of the details. I just wanted to call attention to that as I'm internalizing the breaking news segment. And probably, I don't know, I'm just putting it here right now. I'm sure this is one of those things that's going to just sort of stop the world for a hot second. And in anticipation of before the floodgates really flood, I want to take the humble moment to invite you to join me in a genuine and authentic moment of silence for all those who may have perished and passed away in this unfortunate incident, and all those impacted by it, and all those traumatized by it and having flashbacks and experiencing horrible experiences, and anybody in between that needs a moment of silence. And of course, as always, kind of meta included, all those suffering everywhere who have recently passed, and those impacted by that endless parade of death we call normalcy. A moment of silence, friends, please, and thank you. Namaste. Thank you for participating. I mean that sincerely. As much as we have to struggle on and keep moving forward and stiff upper lip and all that, in the face of fragile mortality, to qualify it no further than that, because it's the sheer singular bleeding edge of unity that keeps us all interconnected, is our mortality, right? It is often right and true and good and just and fair and honest and sincere to genuinely pause and reflect and have a moment of condolence and empathy and sympathy in the most, authentic way we can muster. Elsewise, what are we doing, right? Why aren't we trying? And we ought to strive for that. Touchstoning that with the thing that we rounded out the first part of this double whammy, double header episode with, the if the golden rule as a sort of metaphysical, quantum mechanical axiom is true, we can extrapolate a few things, which I want to present to you as foundational to like everything that I'm arguing. Therefore, not just to be like gone, oh, weird physics stuff, who cares, and brushed off. Because it has real impact, I think. Everyone being each other at a metaphysical level, at a structure of the universe, active function level. And I stick with my argument that the universe is alive in opposition to any other thesis that posits it as an inert collection of stuff or as a simulation in a computer program or any of the variants in that sort of general zone. If a cosmological theory renders the material world without animas, without spirit, and therefore without mechanisms by which spirit is intrinsically, inherently, organically part of the material world, then I consider them flawed arguments and self-debunking. Because with enough effort, with enough silence in the mind, with enough inner spiritual seeking and work of whatever flavor and variety you earnestly endeavor in, you come to the knowledge of that without anyone needing to like berate you about it. And it can be confirmed through tangible means. So I bring you, that's, to recap. Having expressed all that, I bring you to my hybrid theory, which I guess we could giggle and say is science fiction. I am indeed writing some science fiction action adventure novel book series projects in which I will bestow my fictional cartoon character version of myself with all of this stuff as part of their causality and part of their rationale for doing things. And also, I'm sharing this with you on the podcast. Yes, sort of ever so mildly cosplaying my own character, but also speaking to you from the heart and earnestly and sincerely about things that I think are literally true. Not in a fake science fiction-y kind of way, but in a, ancient practices have meaning, tangible meaning, because kind of way. And the because and the ... having many things that come after it that are very, very complicated, and some would argue highfalutin. Some would say impossible. Some would say improbable. Some would say, hard to believe. But that I urge you to consider, because if they can be tangibly, personally verified and confirmed by anyone and everyone that puts in the earnest effort to test them in a all of life can consider itself human, living science and scientists and, product, also product of science, it can be, one can get there and probe it and test it and question it and verify it. As unlikely as that might appear at first blanche, at first listen, at first glance. So, if you're really new to the show, brace yourselves, strap in, hang on, we're about to cover some new ground. If I may. If I've rambled about this before somewhere in the podcast, you probably haven't even caught that episode yet, and it'll just hit you double whammy when you do. Here we go. Where's that bit? So much for having things keyed up. At the core of my thesis. Drum roll, please. the manifold path of collapsing timelines. What does that mean? Well, manifold, many folds, having many paths, collapsing, not in a tunnel falling apart and trapping all the excavators and drill operators underground horror story kind of way, but in a merging and transmutational kind of way, convergence through transmutation. And timelines, as in, if we were to take quantum physics, whatever the newest, fandangliest, cutting-edge label, all-inclusive theory of everything, right? Science is struggling to create a theory of everything, and there's things that they're dissatisfied with, blah, blah, blah. And I know that many people are outright radically anti-science, and I've addressed this before in the show. I think I addressed it to some degree in the last episode, but I'd like to make a quick comment here once again for anyone who's just joining us now. There's the methodology, the tools, and raw language of science. That's not necessarily all that horribly corrupt, and isn't necessarily all 100% to be rejected as completely fake and only here to mislead you. That sort of belief structure, in my personal, humble opinion, after a lifetime of observation, is naive enough to be dangerous. And when pushed to extremes, toxic. Put a pin in that, because I do believe at some point you'll get another earful of explaining in greater detail why I've come to those conclusions. Pins go up, corkboard to the right. It's imaginary corkboard with all the big red pins and all the ideas / themes that we're pinning together, like in the meme. Waving arms around, pointing at corkboard. Actually, I haven't made that meme where I reenact the meme. I need to do that. I need to meme myself into the reenacting of that meme. And maybe even do like a crossover meme where it's me and the original guy, who at this point I so decontextualized, I forget where that's from. Me explaining stuff to my friends. Guy pointing at things. Okay. Manifold path of collapsing timelines. If you haven't read The Dancing Woolly Masters, you might want to pause and swing on by your Barnes & Noble, if you still can. If we haven't post-apocalypted the world so hard that there's no more Barnes & Nobles, or there's no more, and it's only you can only buy your books from Jeff Bezos. Sorry, Jeff Bezos, don't sue me. Is my show on Amazon? I don't think it is. But that's not necessarily because I'm actively protesting them, although I might be. I don't remember right now. I forget. Depends on which timeline I'm in. But if you read The Dancing Woolly Masters by Gary Zukov, and you read Alan Watts' The Way of Zen, both of which are 100% genuine, personal, authentic recommendations. Am I an influencer? Maybe, but if I am, no one's fucking paying me to say this. Swear to God. The only people paying me to say this are you, dear listeners. By listening, you help me not fall into complete oblivion. Keep listening. Keep listening to the show, because it gets weirder and weirder. But here we go. All right, focus. Focus, Seppo. Is it time to play music? Almost. Not yet. The following is applicable as a theoretical statement, in my humble opinion, to both the individual human experience, as in this applies to your local mind, body, locality, phenomenology. That sentence was horribly constructed, but I think it still conveys information worth processing. So this is both individual and, if I may be so bold, collective. In and spread out along multiple axes of ways you could measure the collective. What does that mean? Let's pause for a second and consider that. it's ridiculous, if I may make this social critique. I am of this camp, although there's so many camps, you can't just like define everything by camps that way. It doesn't make sense intellectually, but I am of the thinking that it is absurd and ridiculous that we're arguing about, in heightened, alarmist, manipulated terms, wedge issue of treadmill of destruction and division and distraction, about whether or not it's okay to teach the facts of history as corrupted and or as uncorrupted as they may or may not be, at all, because of some sense that blame everything on Marxism. Which, on the face of it, folks, doesn't make sense. A lot of the people shitposting Marxist statements might actually like some of the things that Marx wrote, and might not actually disagree with him. Not that I'm a Marxist. Don't fucking jump to conclusions, please. Remember, we're not bringing those in to this sacred space we're sharing. The human animal, if I may share with you for your consideration, is more than the sum of its parts, especially in that it is both the way you see it and the way you experience it as one member of the human beast, an individual and a collective. And the collective part has been denied for quite some time, almost on purpose, it would seem. Things that make you go, not only horizontally or laterally, as in you as an individual and your next door neighbor and your brothers and sisters and your cousins and your parents, dead or alive or whatever, whoever, like horizontally across the surface of the of your reality, are you interconnected with them in a sense that is a high order collective, but also, because it cuts in multiple directions, dear friends, this radically impacts everything you do and everything you observe and everything you experience, in my humble opinion. But you are also an individual and a collective as you. Insert your name here, dear listener. The person, or as I like to point out, personae, with the more antiquated version of the word person that ends with the silly A and E that are conjoined. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, however it is originally supposed to have been pronounced. But personae, you, dear listener, and everyone you know, and everyone that is alive, and everyone that's ever existed, have always been, functionally speaking, in the metaphysical, architectural ways that the universe works, themselves some sort of hyperbolic, hyperspatial, hyperdimensional, individual and collective simultaneously all at once. The way you can't separate up from down, you can only fixate on one or the other. In this reality that you're hearing these words come out of your speakers, we have spent millennia conditioning ourselves to just neglect the collective parts. But they're still there. What does that actually mean? Probability, wave, form, functions. But before we go on to that, let's spin a little loop-defying audio entertainment so that we aren't boring you to tears. Here is your next favorite entertainment of listening things with the dubsteppy sound clubhouse song, Experimental Turntable Jigsaw from New Beginnings by the Honorable DJ Zed. I don't know why I said honorable. It doesn't fit, does it, DJ Zed? Nope, not the right one. Okay, we shall keep searching. On the pie wedge chart of shit you know versus shit you don't know, the slice of shit you know is the smallest, thinnest slice. The next largest slice is shit you know that you do not know. And the rest of the effing pie is shit you don't know that you don't know. And that is one of the only hard, absolute truths in the world, if I may be so bold as to say that. Now, something that you can know, dear friends, is through direct observation and some metaphysical exercises that you are part of your own collective of probability waveform function parallel universes of your own private multiverse of this body incarnation that you call yourself in this life that you're living right now. Like Schrodinger's cat in the box, you're both alive and dead and alive in an infinite series of similar but slightly different movies or parallel universe of experiences that are manifesting because God is everything and everyone in an all-encompassing ohm of dancing particles of everything kind of way. Experience is the drive, right? You are living through the probability waveform manifold tree of toroidal, spiraling, probabilistic patterns of likelihood of what you might do with your life, what you have done with your life, what you are doing with your life. And every choice and every branch and every event is a bifurcation in which the expression either diverges, fractally spiraling out more and more layers of complexity in divergent nuance of difference of experience, or converges, draws timelines in through arriving at some unifying point of unifying convergent action. This is proved mathematically and epistemologically in the actual measurable historic algorithm of evolution. Yes, I know a lot of people out there just going to knee-jerk, kick the can, go, "Burp, evolution is fake," blah, blah, blah. See the note about you just can't do, we're going to just roll with the critical thinking of if there's a true, uncorrupt version of biological evolutionary theory, let's just say we haven't actually fully arrived at that yet, because science, even in its uncorrupt form, in its truest form, in its best, shining, most heroic, wow, I didn't nail the word heroic there, did I? I just stumbled right over that. In its most, all those things I just said, it hasn't fully, accurately, and without, missing bits and pieces and without some controversy, described the full phenomenon as it could be described. Why? See pie chart referenced above. And or just prior in terms of audio footage. And yes, that's the correct term because footage means length in feet. Moving on. Every individual is like a manifold expression, not like, literally is a manifold expression of all the possible probability waveform function defined lifetimes that could have probably been lived in or lived through, given our physics plus metaphysics plus spirituality understanding of the universe, right? And the through line, I know that was a big, gnarly, chunky sentence of a paragraph, of a sentence to get through, but here's the gnarlier part. Stick with me, my friends. The story gets interestinger. One second. Boom. Given the quantum entanglement of your own probabilistic fractal iterances being all you, in other words, not only are you branching from the same physics like a fractal flower unfolding a million identical little flower bundles in a flowery way, the whole consciousness apparatus, the whole God being bifurcating itself and refining itself through whatever intense spirographic elves in the machine behind the mushroom wall kind of way that God does that, because it is my intellectual argument that said that is exactly what God is doing. Should you have not put that together yet? Some people don't. I'm also being snide to be funny. You can arguably phenomenologically commune with and organize a convergence towards a collective merging of all of your personal bell curve threshold common multi-self fractal iterances or iterations. And I'll pause there because that's a mouthful that I want to unpack. Phenomenologically, I just keep using that word because I don't mean this is a fancy idea I believe in and therefore I want people to believe in it. I mean, there's evidence that this is something like seeing and breathing and digesting food that the human body as an apparatus can do, but we've been distracted from it. So we've ignored it literally for centuries, for generations and generations. We've just, like willful little ignoramus brats, stuck in a corner for being brats, we've willfully ignored through self-oppression these modalities of operation that we can access, although it requires a lot of intense non-effort of the Zen meditation kind. Okay, so to commune and organize a convergence, I posit to you, friends, that fighting about the solutions to ideology by arguing over which ideology is most righteous and then escalating towards conflict, which leads towards increasingly butthurt feelings which outrage everyone and leads invariably, if you limit to the mundane material and you don't allow yourself to think outside of those boxes, to war, and therefore the profiteering on that war, and therefore a vicious cycle of war that's toxic, not only because it's war, but because it's a business model. And I'm not just pulling that out of a hat. Take a quick glance through history. Don't take my word on it. Ask others. There's a delightful video, by the way, to insert here one other reference that I'd be like, go do this soft ass research, because it is soft ass research to just go get a DVD. But there's a DVD you can find. It might be torrentable somewhere. It might be downloadable for free for legit somewhere. It might be, I don't know where it is, but it's called Why We Fight. It's sitting right over there on my shelf. I can see it from here. Wait, where'd it go? There it is. Why We Fight. Sometimes if you dig around in the discount bin at your favorite giant box video store of whatever generation media you are currently consuming video footage in, DVD, I don't know if anyone's still buying VHSs, but I want to believe that in the VHS science fiction 70s retro historical sci-fi version of my past life, this video is there in the discount bin at the bottom, and people found it on VHS, took it home, and watched it on their really nice high-end VHS machines. because it's a brilliant documentary that catalogs what I'm talking about, referencing with the thing I just referenced. And also, as always, disclaimer, 100% honest, genuine, authentic endorsement. No one's paying me to say that. I just like that documentary because it's brilliant. If no one has that up on YouTube, like, someone should do that. I'm not going to do it because I don't know how people get away with doing it, but other people get away with putting YouTube videos up that they technically doesn't look like they should have the rights to be putting up, but they do anyways. But I'm not going to play that game, so don't fuck with YouTube. Only as much as that I respect and admire that they let me do my show. I've only had like one weird incident with them. Actually two. One was rescinded and one was not. One was enforced, and I still don't understand why. But that's the story for another day. Bell curve threshold. Let's unpack that. Imagine a tree of all your possible selves. Now imagine it like graphed out, right, in a flat 2D chart. One axis is defining a forward-facing D-shaped bell curve. The bottom portion of this graph, if you're visualizing, is the threshold of like worst case scenario down to the most worst possible probabilistic within the confines of physics, but maybe bordering on a little science fiction-y of, you know, it could have happened to you, life. There's an outside extreme in which it's like, you know, it isn't just you being dead the whole time. And of course, these things all have multiple branches within them, right? So each bar is like a cluster of lives that you lived along this unifying arc of, let's say, starting circumstances that then sort of express new branches and new probable outcomes that are explored every time you do something that's different than you did it in another parallel universe that's being lived through. You fork in the road, you know, diverge into two new emergent probability-driven mini universes of yourself. Okay? And those are the cherry blossoms of this beautiful fractal gasmic tree that is your sacred divine tree of individuated existence in the lifespan that you exist now. Never mind previous lifespans or other like past life regression issues. We can talk about that. I have talked about that in other episodes. We can come back, circle around it, talk about it in depth again on a special episode. This is not even that. I mean, just the you that you think is just you sitting there by quote unquote yourself as you listen to this podcast. You are your own fractal gasmic tree of infinite probabilistic driven like narratives that you're not experiencing, but you are in this infinite universe of private mini microverses of you. And that's not just fancifully, theoretically might be happening. That's how life functions. You've just shuttered it out. It's one of the great things omitted by, you know, the greatest hoax of the hoaxes ever hoaxed. And if I may be so bold as to suggest to you, these iterations, each of them having their own home branch or home arc timeline, there's a sort of golden axis. There's many axes. There's many ways you can analyze it, like a reboot post pandemic version of Sliders. I want to write that. Don't steal it from me. You can imagine just jumping around like what's the other one? Quantum Leap. I'm also like, I want to write those reboots where they merge and it's the same thing, but it's different things, and it's my thing, what I'm talking about right now, I'm telling you. Those iterations and the various branches, you can imagine jumping around and going, oh, here's a universe, a personal, private microverse in which I am the best version of my pipe dream job that I imagined when I was a kid. Great. And there's a whole infinity of branching things within that like bubble, within that branch, within that, the most technically accurate term is rope of probability, waveform function, lifetimes or timelines or tunnels, just sort of life tunnels. Avatar tunneling through the phenomena we call living through time. And given that that is so, given that that's what's happening, given that, as complicated as it was to get to that description, that is the ongoing act of creation. And you have an infinity of yourselves, like an infinity of Doctor Strange, like visiting, previewing the infinity of probable outcomes, or like the delightful, to kind of zoom in on something else that I recently found on social media. There's this cryptic meme about trying to wrap your brain around like the recursion that happens inside of the 7-minute flashback of like seeing your life flash before your eyes as you're dying, or in the 7 minutes as the last oomph of like you're dead, you're dying, you're dead, and like the last 7 minutes of you, no longer being functional. In theory, according to some excuse me, folks. Just let that vocal cord go dry and get all frogged up. That was a literal frog in my throat moment. In that 7 minutes, the following creepy thing happens, which, if you think about it, is a recursive fractal. If this theory is true, in the 7 minutes of that like last final, and then ultimately life is over, because everyone goes through that. Everyone's going to die. No one gets out of here alive. You relive your entire life from birth to death. It makes sense then, in the last 7 minutes of that reliving it, you then have that recursive 7-minute fractal experience again and relive your entire life from birth to death in a encapsulated 7-minute fractal inside of itself. We can nerd out really intensely on all the different axes, thresholds, let's put it that way, along which you can drive a division or an analysis, better word, an analysis of the fractal nature of your reality, right? And you can also fixate on the fact that for most of your life, you've never experienced anything that it's possible, right? You, in this lifetime that you're living, you may have like never ever had any kind of experience that would indicate that that is real and that is possible. So, respect, I get it. It's a hard pill to swallow. But I humbly suggest to you, especially if you're listening to this podcast right now, it's true of everyone, but if you're listening to this podcast right now, you and I have reached a point in which, essentially, vis-a-vis the magic of technology, are both contemplating this phenomena. I'm telling you my reasons for thinking that it is a real, live, true fact. The way, at one point in human history, we did not know what the genome was in a mathematical way, and we couldn't describe it and depict it and effectively manipulate it. And now we totally do, to the point where, we were from an outside in, but now we're from an inside out, right? And that's why scary, spooky science fear-mongering about vaccines is popular. Oh, crap. Is that going to fucking get this show pinged? Just because I said the word, don't algorithms. If you're listening, AI algorithms, I wasn't making any statements about one direction or the other about that nonsense. But I digress. People will project and assume, and so will the AIs. That's the scary part. In your living fractal, gasmic, beautiful life tree, there is a golden axis along which, or there is a central axis where all things are naturally sort of through the tug of war of entropy and progress, striving either to converge or to diverge. And then if you zero in on the convergence of all these phenomena, all these infinite fractal selves of you, all these infinite recursive fractal iterations of you living in parallel universes, you can round up all the ones that are already organically, by coincidence, converging, right? And posit that, theoretically speaking, it would make really silly, wicked, perfect sense that if they were, they're all listening to this podcast right now, because that is evidence of their convergence. Okay, if that is so, theoretically speaking, I don't know if I'm 100% right, but I kind of have this urge to say that this is what's happening. If you think about all this bell curve, this forward-facing D shape of probability waveform functions of yourself, they will all have things in common, and they will all have things divergently not in common. But there's an overriding commonality, which is we're sharing this moment here and now for whatever reason. And you're engaging in listening to this podcast, in depth, not just this episode, but, several episodes, because you're like, what the fuck? Theoretically, if let's take it as granted, you, individual listener, have all of these other selves, and that is, and you could converge them. Let's acknowledge that it's a theoretical question of what if you could converge them. There's an argument to be made that if you converge them all sufficiently, both in the mundane material sense, in that you strive towards developing some sort of congruity and synchronicity, synchronized as in one pop cultural example, an artist calls it certainty versus uncertainty, which is technically like straight up out of physics kind of true, right? If you can arrive at a cohesion, you could strive towards transmuting the timelines through an actual sort of metaphysical merging of them. Arguably, this may have a lot to do with the deep and ancient ideas of manifesting healing, manifesting peace amongst a diverse, collection of people, and all of these things that we find so elusive. And one of the curious factors that makes me feel like there's a reason to hope that this might be the case is the general effort made to minimize all the evidence and distract everyone from this kind of activity. The D curve that I'm envisioning and that I've asked you to envision includes an upper perimeter limit, and a lower limit, right? In terms of an up-down sort of axis of things. And one can think of, especially if you have been stitching together the different pieces, that I'm invoking a theory that includes Jesus and Buddha and Mithra and anyone else that's in history been mythologized and or reported by faith as having truly ascended, achieved enlightenment. What does that mean? If it's possible, if they are not top-down gods sent down here to torment us with something that we could never achieve, but rather, as others and I have argued throughout time, examples of what the life genome has within its reach and capacity, then, as they themselves often state in their own gospels, are examples of what we and all individuals potentially have within them. And the tricky, finicky, what the fuck question has always been, how do we transmute ourselves to be in full Christ consciousness? How do we how do we become a Buddha? Right? How do we become this living light being, as is pointed towards in all the various sort of descriptions from all the various traditions, this living consciousness being? Well, it helps to compile an all-inclusive sort of trying to get a bigger picture, science, spirit science sort of ad hoc take on what's actually going on in the universe, to try to, and maybe base an answer on reality as opposed to an answer on some cognitive dissonance riddled set of psyop manipulative belief edicts, right? Instead of dictating what should be believed and how it should be believed, we should be communing directly with reality, communicating directly with reality, and trying to get a deeper and deeper, more genuine, more authentic understanding of how it actually works. Thus, I say to you, if you take that challenge, you can come to the personal verification of these claims. And given that, then you can understand the calling to heal not only yourself individually, but the entire species collectively through the process of using, admittedly, mystical methodologies in order to internally, through a deep revelation of the quantum entanglement of consciousness as it disseminates from on high, wherever the fuck that is, from deep, 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 deep within, from Planck length and beyond, from the fractal zone, and or whatever, from nirvana, from Merkaba, from wherever the consciousness arrives from, and investigate for oneself and experience a life-changing reveal deep within, in a place of like, no one can take this away from you. No one can tell you that it was a lie. No one can tell you that you're just crazy, because you can confirm it, and another person can confirm it, and another person can confirm it. It's like how you eat food, and eventually you're going to take a poop. Can't be denied, right? And if the argument holds true throughout, which I posit to you, dear friends, it can and should be followed to prove itself as valid throughout, because that in and of itself is part of a metaphysical experience that is both strongly encouraged and arguably potentially necessary as we journey through life and time and space, ever questioning what is the meaning of life. To identify the worst case scenario and the best case scenario of our infinite selves, and wordlessly, through whatever spiritual means make the most sense, negotiate the convergent metaphysical evolution through conscious intent, through meta-conscious intent, through meta-spiritual manifesting intent. The convergence up instead of down, although arguably let me pause here for a second and make a quick sidebar comment. After I play with you the final audio entertainment track of today's part 2 session, as we jam through these deep, significant things that I feel needed to be discussed in order for appropriate, public discourse and comprehension of like where I'm coming from when I speak on anything else going on in the world. I'm anchored in all of this, right? It's rooted. My opinion of the world is rooted in that which I'm describing to you. There is an adorable obsession in all life forms, I think, especially all life forms that achieve, walking, talking, people pod status of what you might, generally call humanity. You really could call Zoomanity, a la that movie. Brilliant movie. It kind of opens the door on the reality that all forms of life arguably could. Not that they're making that argument scientifically, but it does sort of open you up just to the notion in a sort of wistful, fanciful way. But I posit to you that all life, all things that are alive, are the divinity striving towards personhood. Personhood as valid and as opinionated and as filled with potential ego traps and self-destructive corruption as any one of us, dear friends and listeners. Back to the golden rule, right? If this work tangibly can be tested and verified, then wouldn't the following, arguably, theoretically speaking, wouldn't the following process or practice be an exceptionally better, more effective, more efficient, more impactful solution that actually solves problems at hand than any of the things we're arguing about or fighting each other about or killing each other over or threatening, this and that about hitherto up until this point, historically, right? Wouldn't learning how to navigate all of that phenomena so that you could bring everyone into a deep awareness of the unifying elements involved, so that personal ego, personal bias, personal hatreds, personal bigotry, personal failures, personal corruptions, personal evils can all be transcended, and in transcending them, transmuted, and in transmuting them, healed, truly healed, the way you think of in the cinematic sweep of someone fighting some disease and being healed and recovered and back to normal life and moving on and doing the rest of what they need to do. Because why am I bringing it to that? Because arguably that's the calling, right? And we're fighting about how to do it. We can't legislate our way into utopia. I'm no fool. No legal nor ideological enforcement of mentally made up sentences by force vis-a-vis violence will ever solve the problems that we face. But perhaps, I posit to you, friends, as I totally forgot to play the music that I teased I would play a hot second ago, perhaps if we delve deep into this experience and bathe in the revelation of understanding what that experience brings us to, and here I want to insert intellectually in terms of like, if you haven't watched it, good enough time to set that up on your playlist next. But Terence McKenna's The Transcendental Object at the End of Time. If that sounds a little too hardcore for you, then stick with watching both the first and the second movie, available on the Awaken the World's profile on YouTube, because the first one, Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, and the second one, Ashanti, I think that's what it's called, are powerful, beautiful, and I'm giving you a genuine, real-life, personal, authentic recommendation no one's paying me to say. And it helps sort of, people have sources. Here's my, someone did a really great job of making the documentary I shoulda, coulda, woulda wanted to have made. Also, because I spent a lot of time reading and exploring and seeking into these themes and subjects, and wowzers. Once you really get down into the thick of it, you can really get to a place of this is that, real magic is organically real, and you don't feel silly saying it. The calling begins, the calling to heal the world and save ourselves from our own madness of destroying the world, either through polluting it till we choke on our own shit, or butchering ourselves and subjugating ourselves to some sort of psychotic artificial intelligence that we failed to properly, train into some sort of much more egalitarian, humanitarian sense of solidarity with us. All the infinite ways we could destroy ourselves. Instead of doing that, we can and should and could and woulda, shoulda, coulda be healing ourselves the way these ancient masters kept trying to teach us how. Why argue for anything other? That's a question we should address, because plenty of people curiously are, and many of them even wave the banner of being God-fearing, Jesus-loving Christians, which is curious. Not to pick a big fight with Christianity, but may Christ be with you truly in the most profoundest sense and wake you up to the reality of how much the various, things have strayed. Yes, much of it is still lovely and beautiful, and there's plenty of communities doing good works and whatnot. But I'm talking about third eye opening, turning into beings of light Jesus, not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, let's do charitable fundraising Jesus. And definitely not, because this has got to be acknowledged, and I will hammer this for as long as I live, because it's ridiculous that it's happening, and it continues to happen, and it must be called out as absurd. You can't really force them to stop, but you got to at least call them to the mirror and say, dude, how can you be doing this? But Rambo gun-strapping Jesus is an abomination. Rambo gun-strapped Jesus is heresy. It's just awful. It's the most anti-Jesus culture I've ever seen, and it sucks. And I'm sorry, I can't agree with it, and I can't support it. But I digress. Tangents everywhere. I kept teasing some music, and I haven't pushed play. Here it goes. Did I introduce it? Did I not introduce it? I don't remember. I hope I hadn't already played in this episode. Us versus them. Poor versus rich. Right versus left. White versus black. Criminals versus cops. Muslims versus Christians. Buddhists versus Rohingyas. Colonialists versus natives. Atheists versus believers. Vegans versus meat eaters. Lone wolf. I ruined that one. Take two. Lone wolves versus sheeple. Democracy versus totalitarianism. Terrorists versus freedom fighters. Gun control versus gun rights. Flat earthers versus globists. The record skipped on that one a bit. Sorry. Flat earthers versus globists. Russians versus Americans. Americans versus Russians. China versus everybody. Statists versus anarchists. Ideology versus ideology. Party versus party. You versus me. Me versus you. WTF. Everybody versus everybody. That's the pattern that needs to end. Because all those treadmills of distraction and the plethora many more out there that were not overtly called out and captured and memeified in that meme are out there to distract you from all the things that I'm gently indicating with my ramblings here on this audio podcast entertainment show for your earholes. Hey there, friends! I just met you, and this is crazy. ... But I am a trans-dimensional being. Take 3. Hey there! I just met you, and this is crazy. But I am a trans-dimensional being sent here to help humanity find the next Buddha and achieve global transcendental awakening. And the really wild part is, so are you, buddy. Or baby. It was originally written as baby, a la referencing the song, the pop cultural hit, one-hit wonder. No, that wasn't a one-hit wonder. The pop cultural, well, in one universe it was, tragically. In other universes it was just a normal hit wonder. But it's so obtuse that people rarely get it, and I have to really point to it pointedly like I just did. Thanks for listening, friends. I have been your erratically vomitus of the Logisticus podcast host with the hiccups. Oh, there's nothing worse than getting the hiccups right at the end of the show in the middle of still saying things to people. I humbly thank you, friends, because truly, there is way too much content out there for any one individual person to consume, and you, whoever you are, just chose to get obsessed with this show, and for that, I thank you. Plenty of you who have been listening along for some time, namaste, shout out to all of you, thanks for your support. Please feel free and more than welcome to come on down to the social medias. Whatever platform you're on, type in at Mr. Zeppo. If nothing comes up or if something comes up that doesn't look and or sound like me, let me know what that platform is by visiting Sprecher.com/show/ZenCast. That's the home base headquarters platform that I both use to create and broadcast live and distribute to all the fine podcast distributory applications that catch this podcast stream. So if you can't find me, you can find me there. Come on down, make a comment on the most recent episode, and we'll take it from there. But also, all the other platforms, and I'm trying to step up my game, so submissions, suggestions are welcome. And help this show reach its star-crossed potential audience out there in the world. Because, we're all in this together, folks. And we've all got ideas about what's going on in the world and how we could try to, arrive at some sort of solution or solutions. And for all the different things being presented out there and for all the different kinds of ideas being circulated, some of them, I think, might reach a little deeper. And here's the final thought I'll close out with, right? No matter how you slice it, no matter what horrors you imagine others are perpetrating, no matter what horrors you truly have survived yourself in this most recent episode of your infinite universe of many lives, no matter which narrative you're bound up in, the next step that we can, that we could, that we should all take together as a collective of individuals that are a collective of individuals nested inside this ambulatory avatar experience, that next step can be truly profound healing. Because arguably, all of those different crazy problems out there, all the different things you're arguing about, meanwhile the AI is about to reach singularity and the robots are definitely on their verge of coming all over the place. We could be healing and collapsing those probable timelines into the highest, most noble, most divine, most in alignment with our true nature, most in freedom and liberation. Because, arguably we can't even begin to know what the world would be like if we were all, fully capable of activating that which is indicated by the confluence of subjects that we've been discussing. Therefore, instead of arguing and fighting about it, we should perhaps be investigating and testing and building a new, hopefully corruption-free, or as corrupt-free as possible, healing science of that. So that instead of dropping bombs and shooting at each other and profiteering on all of that, we actually step up and into whatever other higher callings in the infinitely divine metaverse of infinite universes that we might be currently also unaware of, that we are in neglect of neglecting, right? Because imagine, I've already told you that, right? The leaf and the tree fighting each other over the roots. If I haven't, I'm sure I rambled about it in a recent episode. So strap in, tune in, unwind, and zen out, dear friends and listeners. And namaste. May you turn inwards and enjoy that process, which I've been humbly encouraging you to check out. Because down that path, as opposed to other paths that only lead to more pain and suffering of others and of each other and of the planet and of the animals we cohabitate on the planet with, we could be in an almost science fiction-y kind of way, bootstrapping ourselves into the highest order of operation, which might very well truly turn out to be infinitely more beautiful and more awesome and more resplendently healing and manifestly, universally, egalitarianly, super fairly, super unbiasedly better for all that are alive than what we got going on right here, right now, in this toxic AF, socio-political, ideologically driven gestalt, as identified at the top of this double whammy episode. Namaste, dear friends. Should I leave you with Buffalo Meditation? No, the episode's way too long. Will people listen to it if I push play? It's only a minute and 44 seconds. Do it!
Indigenous soul, original whole, seeing with sacred eyes, life's interconnection, speaking as blessing, divinity realized. In a sacred way, creative as play, offering our self-expressions, as gifts freely given, joyously living, abundance the lesson. A new way to listen, oneness the mission, listening to creation. Animals, stones, trees, rivers, and bones, honoring all our relations. Releasing the lies of shallow eyes, beholding each other's beauty. Freed from the chatter, speaking what matters, heart, soul, community. No more separation, now co-creation, relating essence to essence. Original blessing, joy, peace, and sharing. A new earth, expressing love's presence. Song from the Sacred White Buffalo, Lightning. Downloaded by Victoria Hanshin on November 19th, 2010.
That was Buffalo Meditation. Kelly Mays, as found and publicly available on freemusicarchive.org. Played in compliance with the freemusicarchive.org licensees and shouldn't be cause for any problems on any of the platforms distributing this podcast. Go and support Kelly Mays and other talented music artists by listening and collaborating with them over there on freemusicarchive.org. Namaste, friends. Thanks for tuning in. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts.